On today's episode of The Dead Life, I have here none other than astrologer extraordinaire Tom McMullan. He's going to enlighten us on what we can expect in 2022. 2020 had aspects that showed us that a virus would blanket us all. 2021 was a year of rebuilding and figuring out what we want our lives to look like, where we want to live, and who we want in our lives. Every year carries an energy. Let's find out what we have in store for us. You can follow me on Instagram at Medium Allison and on my Facebook fan page. Tom, welcome back.
Thank you, Allison. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's great having you here. It's always just like us talking, except they insist on recording us.
They're gonna listen.
Yeah, that's right. So 2020 was scary enough for everyone. And I remember you saying that a virus would blanket us and people would go back to traditional values. And I'm like, how's everybody going to go back to traditional values? At the same time, I thought that sounds great, but a lockdown happened.
Right.
And that's how we went back to traditional values. Parents had to get to know the kids they didn't really know. Right.
Right. And the jobs they hated. And
Right.
yeah. Mhm.
And then last year, or well, this year, which will be last year in a couple of weeks, 2021 has very much been people rebuilding their lives and figuring out their values and
Yes.
what they want their lives to look like. So in 2022, should we be scared or excited?
I would say excited. I'm an optimist at the end of the day. I mean, I
Mhm.
have a moon in Sag, so that
Right.
makes me emotionally more an optimist than a pessimist.
Right.
Very little Capricorn in my chart, which is a good news, but
Yeah.
not that that's bad for Capricorns, but Capricorns has been very much a part of what we've been going through in
Okay.
terms of changing the structures of our lives. And you know,
Restriction.
right, and Saturn that rules Capricorn is represented in the things that secure us in our material and habits and things that we do
Mhm.
that we've always done.
Right.
And there's been this obliteration of those things, which is not happy for Capricorn, because it's like, you just tore down my building, now I have to build it over again.
Sure.
So we're going to be talking about an entire year of what's ahead of us. And so when we're talking about an entire year, it's different than a month to month type of situation, because an entire year we're going to be talking about how it affects humanity as a whole rather than specific individual components. It's big picture stuff, essentially.
Sure.
And so it's like when I do a chart with someone natally, I always do what's the entire story of their journey, starting with what they brought in to work on in their past, their karma, how they'll recreate it and bring it into the present, and then what they're trying to do to eliminate the things that held them back from the karma so they can move toward their dharma and their future and progress. So I'm going to be talking about our past first, in terms of, like you already brought up,
Sure.
2020 and the issues we were working on, and then this year and how that affected us.
Mhm.
We Our past, really represents a lot of the fact that Pluto and Saturn were the strongest, dynamics. Which, once again, we've got Capricorn there, so and they're in Capricorn. And these are the structures that have been obliterated by the pandemic, because it
Right.
began in January of 2020 is when
Right. Can you
that
believe it's
hit.
been 2 years? That's just unbelievable.
Well, and again,
Unreal.
nothing happens overnight. So when we created this new sort of restriction globally by a pandemic, it changed us globally. So when we're looking at the big picture, we are looking at a global phenomenon that's affecting all countries around the world and all peoples within their cultures. And they're all going through this,
Yes.
whether we're talking about authoritative regimes or democracies or whatever,
Mhm.
or how we're approaching the pandemic as different cultures and societies. And so everyone's going through their own version, and we have ours in the United States. Saturn did move into Aquarius in this year,
Mhm.
and which is a really interesting thing, because they're very opposite each other. Because Saturn represents in Capricorn restriction of
Right.
things that we can't do, and Aquarius represents
Freedom loving fools.
revolutionary change from the things that restrict us, you see.
Yeah.
So it represents our individuality and integrating into the social structures. We're trying to figure that out. That's what this year was about. How do we change our habits and our patterns into a progressive dynamic and move out of the things that were holding us back, whether they're relationship profiles, job descriptions, and this is why we're all going introverted in 2021, that 2020 forced us to, and then it kept us going this year. It kept us
Right.
making us feel like, okay, I need to reevaluate my life because I know what I don't want to do now that I had time to introspectively look at it.
Mhm.
And now where am I going next? Which is why I've never been
Right.
busier.
Right. Right.
So, good news for me working, but it's a lot of work.
Yes.
And so, and I understand it because, I'm trying to get people to listen to their soul voice anyway. And when you're forced to not have outside distractions, it makes you do that whether you like it or not.
Right.
So, the outer planets will be the significant situations of our influence in a annual reading, because the inner planets, which are, the moon, the sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, are the
Mhm.
triggers of the things of the big picture stuff.
Mhm.
And then when we talk about month to month, I use more of those dynamics. But we're going to talk about the outer planets because they move very slowly and their influence is over long periods of time. And the furthest planet is Pluto, which, so obviously the Pluto and Capricorn dynamic has really been affecting our social systems and will continue to for quite a while. Then you have Neptune, which is the next planet, that's in a sign that I want to talk about. And then you have the planet Uranus, which is very important in terms of what it represents, because it
Mhm.
represents Aquarius.
Right.
And then you have Jupiter. And so, just in an overall initiation here, I will tell you that Jupiter and Neptune are the biggest influences of this new year, not disregarding the other ones, but that seems to be the focus.
Jupiter, wouldn't that be expansion though? Isn't
Yes,
that
yes,
maybe a good thing?
yes.
There's gonna be a lot of pushback
But
going
it's
on.
it still butts up against the restrictions of the old versus the new. So this isn't going
A
away.
revolution.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
isn't going away. I'm going to start, talking about, the Saturn conjoined Pluto in 2020. It gave us the announcement of COVID-19.
Mhm.
And what it did, eventually Jupiter added itself onto that train in
Right.
Capricorn, which was a
Okay.
really big thing because it expanded what we were already going through in terms of how hard it was.
Right.
And then it gave rise to a chaotic outcome of a presidential election
It was
and
chaotic.
massive protests during the summer.
We
So you
still
see the
have
beginning.
people doing those sorts
Yeah,
of
it's still
things.
going on.
Yeah.
So these are the repercussions we're bringing into 2022,
Mhm.
because that's what this year represented, was sort of like we're in chaos. There is
Right.
no past or future.
And that's each country because I have a lot of
Yes.
Australian fans, and they tell me that there's camps
Mhm.
that they put them in, and people freak out about that in America, the mention of anything like that.
Yes.
But in Australia, they're going through it, and you'd think of it as a Western country. So it's kind of shocking. And then to see how each country acts under pressure, we're all reassessing each other. It's
Right, and
crazy.
then again, you go to the different cultural differences, whether
Yeah.
you're talking about a communist China,
Right.
whether you're talking about New Zealand, which is massively locked down,
Right. Oh my
and how they
gosh.
all have different ways of the Scandinavian countries very different.
Yeah.
So, there's Western culture and there's East. I mean, there's all these things that are all going through their version.
Right.
There is no one version going on.
Right.
So, and then when we look at that, Saturn and Jupiter in the beginning of 2021 moved into Aquarius together. And I had talked about this before, how when you put the two planets together, the one of restriction and the
Mhm.
one of expansion, if they work together, it's the best of both. Because
Mhm.
one is overly restricted, one is overly expansive, but together they work as a team.
Right.
And so in this
They can
regard,
strike a balance.
right. But it entered Aquarius. So it entered the sign of progress and innovation.
Right.
You see, so then where we're really headed, which I mentioned before in a podcast, that we're headed into the 200 years of moving out of earth elements into air elements, Aquarius being the highest air element. We're moving
Ah.
into science, medicine, and technology is
That's
the
my sign.
future.
I kinda love that sign.
Yeah, you want to take your money out of everything that's sort of industrial and move it into science, medicine, and technology, because that's where we're headed. So everything we're
Yeah.
reading about is more electric cars, alternative energies,
Yeah.
technology.
Which is kind of scary because, China could just shut down our grids at some point,
But see,
and
that's
then
always the dark side.
how do we function then,
Yeah.
right? But it was something you have to think about. Bitcoin, that sort of thing? Hell
But
no.
it's scary and risky because it's
Right.
new and we don't
Right.
know. But there's always a plus and a minus to every energy.
Right.
So when you talk about, if we all go onto the grid and someone turns the lights off, we're screwed.
Yeah.
And
I
so,
know, right?
which
Right.
will we'll add new technology to stopping that from happening. So it's
Well, it'll be a lot, I think, like 2021 and 2020 was, if that were to happen, because a lot of people had to figure out how to do things for themselves,
yes,
not eat at a restaurant. They had to cook.
yes.
They had to figure out how to get
Got to
by.
teach their kids
Yes,
school work.
yes.
Yes, yeah,
Jack of all trades. That's what they became.
yeah.
And it's going to maybe be more of, we'll have to relearn things if somebody did shut down our electricity. But putting all our eggs in one basket's a little scary for me personally, like with the electricity.
Well, the thing is that the pandemic told us, by virtue of the fact of its discovery and what it did globally,
Mhm.
that it's forcing us to look at medicine and science
Right,
because we didn't need that much before. Now we need a
right,
lot more because these things seem to be. We had SARS, and we had Ebola, all these different things. Now they're getting worse and worse. So
right,
now you can see the science community is like really ramping up, and we got a vaccine for those who believe in it or don't believe in it.
right,
Just it is still science and medicine, and so
right.
you're going to see a AI increase.
Mhm.
We've got billionaires going to space now. It's amazing, and this has happened fairly quickly, and expect more of it happening fairly quickly.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
but I would like to go to the present, and we'll go to the future of this year. But the present,
Okay.
to get where we are now, Pluto is still in Capricorn and will still be there for a while. So we're still going to deal with Pluto transforming our structured systems.
It's government and the population struggling back and forth. It
Yes,
seems like a pushback.
it is.
And so I get that because government doesn't want to give up their power. So this is
Well,
going to be
and how we define
interesting.
government and what it
Right.
rules and where it
Do they
rules.
work for the people
Right.
or do we exist for them?
Right. Or do
Right.
we give it all over to the
Right.
government? Or,
Right.
I mean, it's
No.
all crazy. But that's just it. Where's the balance point? Everything is to
Yes.
find a balance point. Um, and so,
Doesn't this make you even miss the being in um in the 70s there was like the gas issues and high prices, and
uh-huh.
I think I'd take that over this now. This is kind of scary. It's
Yeah.
uncharted
Yeah.
to see something like this happen, and to not have it just be economic, but to have it be biological
Yes.
for us to
Yes.
be dealing with, and then for each country to be figuring out what they'll accept and if they're going to produce in their own country, because isn't part of the lesson that we would learn that the medicine and the science, that we all have to be capable of it internally because we have to be self-sufficient.
Well, we do, but then we
Yeah,
have to rely on systems that provide the tools
right,
that give us that opportunity or chance.
right.
So, you can't disregard
No,
them.
no,
You
you
have to.
can't disregard them, but we have to know them.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Okay.
So we have Pluto stays in Capricorn, Neptune stays in Pisces. So Neptune's in its
Oh.
own it's in its own sign. So okay, so I'm talking right now to someone, everybody, who's very fixed in her energy. And so what I'm going to talk about this year
They
is
know that.
and how much mutability it has to it. She's not going to like all that I'm about to say. But anyway, Neptune stays in Pisces, which is its own sign of water, and it is consciousness and mass consciousness at the big picture level.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So so it stays in that sign. We'll talk about what happens to it while it's there.
Okay, I can't wait to hear that.
Uranus stays in Taurus. And I want to bring this up because of the time we're doing this podcast.
Uh-huh.
Because last night or the other night was a devastation across the southern Midwest with tornadoes amazingly unproportionate in terms
Mhm.
of scale and size, just destroyed so much. Uranus in Taurus was last, and I've talked about this before, in the mid 30s, during the depression of the 30s to the 40s. It was in Taurus. And that's when we had the massive droughts and dust bowls and things that happened then, because
Okay.
the planet of sudden disruption and revolutionary change in the earth sign.
The fixed earth sign.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so we're having all these massive earth events, climate events. We're calling it climate change, but it seems even more extreme now because Uranus will be in the sign for quite a while. And so it changes two things that we have to look at, which is the earth itself: volcanoes, earthquakes, tornadoes, different
Wow.
unpredictable weather patterns. That we have polar vortexes. California is having this like winter river of storms. All these are brand new, but people are coming up with these terms, which are funny. But
Yeah,
but-
they're coming up with terms. I mean,
right,
California's always had flooding. I mean,
right.
but
Yeah,
Yeah.
but again, normally it's like there's a storm, then
Right.
there isn't one, then there's another, but then it's all
Yeah.
dumped at once, and then it
Yeah.
stops and doesn't happen again.
Right.
So
Right.
then you also have Taurus, which rules money. So the monetary systems are being disrupted. Now, you just talked about Bitcoin earlier.
Right.
So where the hell is that? And who is scared about that? Because I
Right.
am. I'm scared
Right.
to death of doing something like that because
Yeah.
I thought stocks were scary. Bitcoin is like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm gonna buy gold bars and, like,
Yeah.
stuffed mattresses. I'm going back to, like, the prospector days of where they didn't trust. They're like, "I'm gonna keep my money in my
But
mattress."
that's our generation, Allison. It's how we like the younger generation go, this is our time, our thing. We're like, yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, right.
So
Have fun with your imaginary coins. Awesome.
So the planet Jupiter is the one that changes signs in this year, and
Yeah.
that's important to understand.
Okay.
Jupiter briefly left Aquarius and went into Pisces very briefly in this last year in 2021, and then it back into Aquarius it went.
Okay.
And now it's moving back into Pisces at the last few days of this year.
Uh-huh.
And it's really interesting because it's going to attach itself to Neptune. So
What
now
does that
we
mean?
take the planet of expansion
Uh-huh.
in Pisces next
Okay.
to Neptune in Pisces. It's actually can be a very beautiful thing. You
Yeah.
won't like it, but you'll like it for the reason of what your work is.
Okay.
Because it's an esoteric spiritual energy.
Okay, great.
Okay,
I love
it
that.
takes us out of our left brain into our right brain. So for your personal life, you'll
Mhm.
hate it. In your professional life, you'll love it, and you'll
What does
do
that
well in
mean
it.
for your personal life? It means
You're fixed. You like your habits and things
I
the way
do
they
like
are.
my
Yeah,
habits.
but that means they're gonna be like it's like mud. It's like the water comes in and just,
Uh,
takes all the grounding out from under your feet in a lot of ways.
uh,
So that means you have to adapt. So we've got a lot of adapting to
well,
do.
I've gotten some practice at adapting through COVID.
Well, we all
Maybe I'll
have.
fare okay. I think people are more adaptable now than before, and I think also successful people are able to adapt. You have
Yes.
to adapt.
Yes.
But when you say in our personal lives, does that mean um that can just be like kids moving or something and adapting to a new order of your family, like who's there
Well, first we
or
have to get to the fact that we're ready to change,
okay.
and then, be able to learn to not be fearful to adapt to new things to begin
Right.
with.
Right.
But it also creates a sense of unknown
Mhm.
because, the mutable nature of water is that water is defined by no form.
Right.
That's what Capricorn's job.
There's no
So
boundaries.
if I have a bottle of water, it's formed by the bottle, but I can pour
Right.
it into the pool tomorrow. It becomes a pool of water.
Right.
So that's the energy of people that don't like not knowing what the form is, which are the earth signs.
Right.
The earth signs like to know the form. And so
Yeah.
they'll struggle the most through that dynamic.
Right.
But in essentially, it expands how we view our lives in a wider, more esoteric way.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at the big picture as we move in from the beginning to say April,
Mhm.
because in April is where it starts attaching itself to this nature of Neptune, and that's where it gets strongest in the spring.
Interesting.
So we may have a lot of flooding. We may have a lot of spring rains and flooding and things like that if you add
Okay.
Uranus and Taurus to it.
But
Um,
it's also spirituality and religion even.
but that's just it because you're
Mhm.
talking about religion and spirituality and philosophy are ruled by Jupiter.
Mhm.
Okay, but the consciousness and the unconsciousness are ruled by Neptune.
Okay.
So the collective unconscious is ruled by Neptune. So as a collective unconscious globally, we're going to be looking at our spiritual systems
Okay.
and dissolving within them. Okay, which
Okay.
is you'll see that happening.
Okay.
We've already seen a lot of dogma religions
Mm.
start, to dissipate. And so those that are very, very dogmatic will hold on for dear life to those who are or more progressive in science and medicine. I mean, you're
Mhm.
going to see more of that division, if you will.
Okay.
So, and that, so it conjoins on April 12th, and April 12th is when Jupiter and Neptune really come together, and that's sort of the apex
Mhm.
of that.
Well,
But
because I always think of April and sometimes it's March, but Easter,
oh yeah,
which is
yeah,
a very celebrated religious
yes,
holiday.
yes,
And so the fact that this is happening at that time to me, I find that interesting.
and it's a resurrection.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's a resurrection time of religion where Jesus,
Mhm.
resurrects beyond what we ever thought could happen. All of a sudden, he
Right.
just disappears back into God, and we're like, "Wait a minute, where'd he go?"
We wanna see you again. No,
Yes.
that would be called the second coming,
So
and maybe
but
that
I
would
want to
be
use
good.
that metaphor as an example of where we will be at
Right.
this time in this part of the year, where we're like to resurrect ourselves more spiritually.
Uh-huh.
So rather than look at your monetary fears, your materialistic
Mm.
needs, and things like that,
Right.
what do you need actually? What do you want actually from those larger levels of your existence? What are your belief systems? Are they being defined for you by things you give power to? Are you
Right.
defining them? It's
Right.
very
Very
important this
that is
year.
important. I mean, for people to recognize too, to not give their power away and don't
Yes,
let other people define who you are.
but the majority does.
Right.
And the rulers want to do that to us
Right.
and have for thousands of years. So,
Uh-huh.
this is why being still, meditating, being internal, listening more to your voice rather than watching the news, listening to giving your power to leaders to tell you what's going to happen and make you
Right.
feel fearful,
Mhm.
all that's got to go away. You've got
Yeah.
to turn all of that off.
Right.
So this, first 4 months of the year, we're looking at the fact that you're going to need to sort of turn all that off in introspection in terms of how we move forward into this year, because we're being given this opportunity energetically by the planet placements to say this is important to do. So
Mhm.
when we all say it, January 12th or January, excuse me, January 1st, I'm going
Mhm.
to go on a diet. I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to do all these things. You don't have to do those things. You don't go on
Right.
a diet. Don't feel like you've got to work out until you pass out.
It's rare that they stay with it
No,
anyways.
no, I
It's
know. I would rather
yeah,
you
we
sit
all
there
do that.
20-30 minutes in the morning
Right.
and meditate, deep breathe, and center yourself before you go into your day and make that your habit, because that's where you're going to find your answers. We're not used to doing that, especially when we're fearful and confused and
Mhm.
unsure of our direction.
Right.
But you don't get it in your head, and you don't get it when somebody else tells you what you should do when they don't know anything about you. You're the only one that knows what you want and where you want to go. You just have to listen to yourself to find out.
One exercise that might help some of the audience out there is if you don't know how to go inward, is you inhale willingness and you breathe in,
Yeah.
and you exhale willfulness and let
Yes.
it out. And just do that over and over again as many times as you need to do until you feel sort of light inside, and then you're centered.
Yes, and so, you know, actually Jupiter is exalted in Pisces and Neptune. They're very beautifully aligned for the
Okay.
higher vibrations of spiritual growth.
That's
It's giving us this window to access it.
It's good.
It
I
is
think it's
good.
good because, I think people need beliefs. You know, they need something that makes them want to be better and do better in life. And I think that the fact that that they're gonna have that power within themselves and recognize it is an important thing.
Right. Well, there's, our the nodal axes of moon, which are karma and dharma as a collective, have been in Gemini and Sagittarius for the last year and a half. They're
Mhm.
going to leave those signs this year also, which I'll get to later. But
Okay.
it means that all the communication that's being thrust upon us with what that represented means that we've been in our heads and we're listening to all the news and we're like reading all this stuff. We're like overloading our
Well, you
heads.
don't know what to
It
believe, and so
right.
it's just yeah, it ratchets up stress
Right.
in
So
people.
the new year, and what you want in the new year is to turn all that off and now be quiet.
Yeah.
And the pandemic made us learn how to do that, and then now we're all going back out again, but we're going to go back out into the same nonsense we started out before the pandemic. And then everyone's talking about unknowns and fears and things constantly,
Mhm.
and so we just need to introspectively look. Now this is, again, it's sort of a spiritual growth period, and on the dark side, there's always a dark side to this energy. So this is also cults go further down the rabbit hole,
Oh,
and
geez.
so we'll see more of
Okay.
that. The lunatics take over the asylum. And
I thought
so
that already happened.
don't lose yourself to idealism. Idealism isn't the course, okay?
Uh-huh.
It's like, what is your ideals of what you want, not the idealism of what you think people want from you,
Mhm.
or following somebody else down the rabbit hole. Break away from anything that has a cultist or idealistic mentality that can't go beyond it. There's no other route other than going down the rabbit hole. So
Mhm.
this is about truth versus in reality versus illusion and delusion.
There's been
Because
a lot of delusion and a lot of illusion. So,
yes,
I mean, when is that gonna come to an end where people just see or they have clarity on what is?
but again, you talk about religion being replaced by science and medicine, but it's also being replaced by a different kind of cultish mentality. So this is where you get this conspiracy theories and people making up stuff and
I
people
don't
going,
think science, can replace religion.
no, it's not
I
supposed to. They're
just
supposed to work together.
right.
That's the
Okay.
point.
Okay.
And so you don't sit there and say JFK Jr. is coming back on
Right.
one hand, and then the other hand, you're like, okay, we don't have any responsibility to anything. We'll just let the government take over. And we're like, no, neither one of those are the answer. It's like
Right.
they're both cults when you think about it. So
Cults.
yeah.
Oh, geez. Because
So it
I had to profile a cult leader once, and I can't imagine, but I think a lot of people, because we're in all this Aquarian energy, and it makes you not want people in your space, I'm seeing people move further and further out to be isolated.
yes.
And so maybe that's gonna have a
That's part of
hand
the
in it.
Aquarian age in essence anyway,
Uh-huh.
and that's Aquarian energy. Saturn and Aquarius is to create your own social structure of
Mhm.
your own, which is what
Right.
a lot of the cults are doing. It's like we're gonna create our own version,
Okay.
and then those people follow that version. It's the same
Mhm.
thing as following anything, you're following.
Right.
So the point is to get internal and lead yourself from the inside out instead of the outside in. Don't get involved in somebody else's ideology. Find your own path and your own way.
I like that.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so, you and I spent our lives doing that
Mhm.
with the struggle of doing it since we are separated from the collective in terms of what we've chosen to do,
Right.
but it didn't stop us.
No.
And so, we're both examples of the fact that it doesn't matter what the form is, where your spirit wants to take you and where spirit wants to help you get there. All you have to do is listen and accept it and let it happen.
I see where you're saying find your balance too, because I'm a medium and I do
Mhm.
this very spiritual. I have this spiritual profession. I also believe in God, which some people would
Yes.
say, well, that's religion. Well, it's something that I'm comfortable with. And each person's going to have to determine for themselves those same boundaries that I've determined for
Right.
myself without trying to force other people to believe in the same thing that you do.
Mhm.
You just have to be you and do that and let that be.
Exactly. And when you say I believe in God, well, then we can ask in all the religions, whose God are we following? Because there's lots of
Right.
them out there, apparently.
Whichever one people
you know,
feel drawn to
yeah,
and that
whether it's
makes them a better
Islam or
person.
Jewish or
Sure.
Christian or Catholic. I mean, there's many
Right.
versions. So
Mhm.
our God is our spirit that is guiding us through who we actually want to become in ourselves, not
Mhm.
something that we belong to collectively.
Right.
And that's in a challenge right now because we're trying to find that individual version of our own spiritual
Mhm.
essence. And I always feel that when you find that and you take risks into something that you feel you want to do that you didn't believe you could, when you take the risk toward it, you find out spirit wants you to go there if that's where you're going. you know,
True
it'll help you
story.
get there. I have
True
complete
story.
trust that I'm not the
Yes.
only one doing what I'm doing, that I am guided. And
Yes,
that's a God
absolutely. Well,
consciousness.
I've been watching, I have Dead University, and I've
Yeah.
been watching the students grow, but also the number of students grow. So I'm actually seeing this happen in generations that are looking for the tools to find their own belief system.
Yeah.
And it's inspiring for me to
Yes.
see that.
Well, and again, it's my definition of ego again is the power you give others to define you. So
Mhm.
when the ego dies, you're free. So
Yes.
then you're on your own and good luck because that's it's such a better journey than
Yeah.
being guided and following somebody else in their world that you have no attachment to.
Right.
Which also drives people into what we call drugs and alcohol, and I don't want to be here anymore.
Which is a lot of the Pisces energy,
Yes,
the
in which it
lack
can
of
go that way.
boundaries, sure.
Yeah, and go that way. So again, thank you for saying boundaries because as we're in a very mutable period of time in the first 4 months,
Mhm.
we feel that fact that our boundaries are being bombarded, but we're choosing to turn them off. So we're creating borders and boundaries at this time when we're easily susceptible from moving from a bottle of water to a pool of water and not feel like we have any choice.
Do an ice sculpture.
Yeah,
Sorry, I need
exactly.
form. I need some form.
But here's news you'll like.
Okay.
On May 11th, Jupiter moves into Aries, and you'll like that because that's a great energy. That's taking Jupiter and moving forward. That's progression. That's pioneering. It's fantastic. It's
That's great.
expanding our collective consciousness to move beyond the past and fight for our humanity through innovation. So
Okay.
this is going to be a great period of discovery of things that come out of nowhere because we're going to go there'll be people that go through the period I'm talking about and come out with ideas they never knew existed inside of them.
Wow.
So innovation will come out of those of you out there who say, I had no idea. I came up with this idea. I could have had a V8. Oh
Right.
my God, no one ever thought of this before. And
Yeah.
off you go. So entrepreneurial dynamics will come out when we get into summer. After the spring, it'll be a beginning of new discoveries and things that are going to come out that
So
move us forward.
necessity is the mother of all
Yes.
invention.
Now we can also fight about our gods and our religions and do that nonsense. If you want to, go right ahead. I'm not going to do that. So if you stay on your own path, that's the goal this year.
Yeah.
You know, introspection, stay on your path. But what is it that you want to innovate in your life? You know, what did you always wanted to do? Say when you were like in your early 20s and then you didn't, you know, did all the stuff your karma told you to do.
Yeah.
It's like we can go back to that point. It's like, no, I'm 20 again. I want to do this.
Okay.
And because those voices were there when you were 20, you just didn't hear them and you weren't listening
Okay.
because you went back into the karma of I need to get married, have kids, you know, I need to work and make so much money, all the things that most of us do and what we've been taught over
You mean
lifetimes.
responsible adulting?
Yes, yes. But in ways
Yes.
maybe we didn't want to do. You know, maybe
Yeah,
someone
who
didn't want to have
does?
children. Maybe somebody
Yeah.
didn't want to get married. Maybe somebody didn't want
Right.
to make their life
Well,
about
there's
money.
plenty of those. I
Yes,
mean, that's
exactly.
there always will be, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
But it's a, you know, and it will be there for quite a while. In October, it goes back into Pisces for a bit because it will retrograde and go back into Pisces, but then it moves forward again. So you know, we'll have a moment at the end of the year forcing us to look at what we have done, what we have innovated,
Sure.
you know, what we accomplished or what we were afraid to take risks toward.
Uh-huh.
But you know, when you take to a fire planet like Jupiter
Uh-huh.
and put it with Aries, you know, that's a warrior energy. But remember that Jupiter,
Can it be war or is it just warrior
well,
energy?
it's warrior energy, but the interesting thing is Jupiter is the influencer of Aries in this
Okay.
situation, and Jupiter's the warrior for those who can't fight for themselves.
Okay.
So, you know,
I like that.
yes, I do too. And so if someone has a lot of Sag, that's their nature. But again, and it can expand the warrior to want to be the one that runs the show, and it's his way or no way. So know the difference.
We have a lot of Sagittarian soldiers out there. My brother is one of them.
Yeah.
So they fight for those who can't fight for
Yes.
themselves. I like that.
So I spoke earlier about the karmic dharmic situation of this year and how it's changing signs. The karma of this last year has been Sagittarius,
Mhm.
and the dharma has been Gemini. And so how we got information in the past has been radically altered by
Yes.
social media,
Yes.
cable news, and all the things that are going in terms
There's
of how we're getting information,
You're right.
Facebook, everything, all the
Right.
social dynamics absolutely in the last year and a half has just blown up.
It's replacing network
Yes,
television.
it has.
It's
It's funny
crazy.
because I was talking to my sister about I don't know if I could watch a network program right now. I
I
can't watch
I
anything with a laugh
know.
track or, you know, these things.
Or
And then we're laughing because it's like I went to see a movie and I said that could have been streamed easily because the quality is just as
right.
well on Netflix and HBO Max
Right.
and Apple. And I'm like,
Yeah.
these are really good.
We got spoiled with our home theaters, didn't
Yes,
we?
yeah. But it really has changed.
Yes.
Communication, we're looking at media, how it's changed dramatically in the
Yes.
last year and a half. And social media has always been part of 2021 in terms of we need to look at this.
Uh-huh.
And now we're going to have to look at this.
Well, it was the only way for a lot of people to feel like they're around others and to travel through talking
Well,
and
and
seeing pictures of other
right.
people in those
Well,
places.
then the other thing is that Sagittarius being the karma
Uh-huh.
was that we weren't allowed to travel.
Right.
And so we're trying to find other ways to communicate.
Right. You know
Mhm.
what? But I think a lot of us, I know I'm one of them, that in 2020, I recognized what a rat race life had become,
Mhm.
and it was too much. So I promised myself in 2021, I was going to do things differently. I was going to pull back from social engagements.
Mhm.
And I've been mindful of continuing to do that because I don't want to go back to the way it used to be.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of people that took inventory of their life and feel better about where they're at.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, and then we're going to talk about the karma dharma where the change is, and that is you're going to be very interested in that because that change happens as we get into the spring, also where we're going to move into Scorpio and Taurus.
Oh,
And so
okay.
Scorpio is the dharma or is the karma, and Taurus is the dharma. And so the karma is the past. Scorpio is to get rid of your dependency issues, your
Okay.
intense emotional reactions to everything. Like
Can
it's
that be
the
dependency on a person, like on
anything,
relationships?
a job, person,
Okay.
A situation where you're emotionally overreacting to everything in some kind of crisis,
Okay.
and moving yourself away from it into Taurus and learning to be more self-sufficient. And again, moving yourself away from the collective consciousness of what everyone else is telling you that you're paying attention to and not yourself.
I think a lot of people are not going to listen to what they hear from the outside. They're going to go more inward. I mean, I can see that happening, and
Yeah.
I'm it's such a good thing.
Well, it's make your life less complicated. And
Yes.
so because it rules Taurus and Scorpio, very money driven energies, we'll see a fluctuation in the monetary system in this year. And we've already seen it. It's
Uh-huh.
like all of a sudden massive inflation overnight. And then they go, well, let's just
Yes.
go away. It's only temporary. And then it's like, we don't know. We're all confused. So already
It
having
didn't
the
go away.
consciousness
It
of,
didn't go
you
away.
know, of is this 1973 again
Right.
with gas prices and lines, or is it
Right.
just it's going to be fluctuating quite a bit.
Yeah.
So it'll seem like we're fine, and then it's like not. So this is how it kind of seems
So
to
it's gonna be a
go.
yo-yo of a year?
Yeah, yeah, it seems
Okay.
to move in that direction. Not every financial crisis is like the end of the world, which is how we keep seeing it. It's like,
Mhm.
now it's like, oh my God, everyone's poor and we can't afford it milk. And it's like, no, that's overreacting.
A lot of people are feeling the pinch at the grocery store and at
Yeah,
the pump, though. I mean, devil's advocate, I'm just saying, it's affecting
yeah. But
people in a big way.
it is by the accumulation of the
Right.
things that have happened over the last year
Right.
and a half. So
And you know what's ironic too? Joe went to look at cars because he wants to get
mhm,
a new car, and, um, there's a shortage of
mhm.
cars because things being shipped from other countries aren't coming,
Oh
so
yeah.
why don't we open up Michigan and some factories
I
here? I
have
thought we'd
already
learn that.
I've already ordered my car for next year.
Did you?
Yes, and it will be
Wow.
done ready in June, but it's all electric
Ok
because I'm going with science, innovation, and
See,
technology
I'm
because that's
sticking
where
with a gas tank.
yeah.
I'm just not there yet.
Well, I
So
don't drive a lot, so I can do
right,
electric
right,
easily, but it just,
sure.
it just seems to be the future, and that's where I'm
You
going.
and I are such we're 2 sides of a coin. I
I know.
like it. We give
I
both
know. I
sides.
know. Well, that's why we work well together.
I know it's true.
Um, in terms of looking at your life being simple, look at your financial monetary issue. Are you about money? Is this what you need, the house this big? Do you need the expensive car? What do you really want when it comes to the basic practical things in life?
Sure.
Are you spiritually fulfilled, less than you are financially wealthy? Which is more important to you? Those other issues about internally driving your choices and decisions about what you really want versus what you think everyone's told you you're supposed to be or have.
Uh-huh.
Do we need to even make Christmas like buy 1,000 toys for your
Right. Yeah,
kids,
you really
you know,
people are I'm feeling
and then
that way this Christmas,
and then stress
looking at it.
yourself out. And
Sure.
I mean, that's always seems we bring that up. This is really going to test us in terms of where we make self-sufficient choices based once again on who we are as individuals, and not being responding to crisis overwhelmingly. Now
Right.
that we've learned that social media can really force that upon us easily,
Yes.
all of a sudden, somebody's read this article and you're like, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. And it's like, no, it's not. Separate yourself. Where are you in this
Let's
right
look at it
now?
from a practical
Exactly.
perspective. And I would like to also say designers and expensive things don't make you who you are.
Yeah.
They don't define you. And I think there's a whole generation that feels defined by their labels
Right.
and by what their Gucci belts and what they're wearing. And I don't think they know how to dig deep and be real on the inside and connected internally. So I
Yes.
hope the younger people as well will start to have the awakening in the spiritual realm and
Yes.
recognize that the money doesn't matter. Money's nice, but it doesn't define who you are.
Well, we're looking at monetary systems. We're looking at resources. What are your valuable resources? Maybe it isn't money.
Right.
Maybe it's
Maybe you have a lot of love in your
maybe it's
life.
travel.
Sure.
I mean, I know a lot of people, I say, you're not about money, you're about its resource to travel. Go, oh, I save everything for travel. Yeah. So,
I don't know anybody that likes to travel right now. I'm just gonna say
well,
that
not now,
because
but in
it's
general.
horrible.
Yeah.
We just
No.
we just flew to Chicago and I can't. I'm just staying home.
But if you're a
So,
nomadic personality type that know that about yourself, know that you're
you
not
can't
about
get a cocktail and something to eat on a flight, I'm not going. It's just not enjoyable.
Well, when that comes back, we'll get you back on a plane,
Thank you.
Allison.
I've got tickets to Hawaii that I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna get to use for a year.
Well, I wanna go myself,
I know
so
you
we'll
do.
try and go together if we
Yeah,
can
that
do
would
it.
be fun. I
Yes,
like that.
yes.
So,
So,
can I ask you this question?
yes.
2020, you narrowed it down to 3 distinct categories.
Mhm,
It was virus, innovation, and family values.
mhm.
Is there something that will define 2022 in that way, or is it just too big to put into
It's
so
too
few
big.
words?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
too
So
big.
we're gonna have to do reviews,
Yes.
overviews of this segment throughout 2022 to remind people of what's going on in
I
that
would say
3-month period.
seasonally,
Yeah,
yes. So when we get into April,
yeah,
we bring this back up to say, "Oh, yes, it's starting to be what he was talking about," and then moving in through the year and seeing it. But it is a big picture thing.
right,
And it's all remember when we're talking about the planets and the signs and everything, it's energy.
right.
And so when I'm talking about energy and I use the symbols of the elements,
Uh-huh.
fire, earth, air, and water, that is energy. And water, which is a very strong force in this year, very strong force in this year, is a mutable energy. So it isn't something that's constantly you can define it A, B, and C.
Water signs really worry me for people with weak minds.
Well, the water signs, if you are an artist,
Uh-huh.
if you are a medium
Yeah.
or someone who does anything spiritually, you're only enhanced by this.
Right, that's the upside,
Right.
that there's all these depressed people, and I bring them through for their parents and their loved ones,
Right.
and so, I mean, the water always worries me for the people who may have suicidal
But that's I
tendencies.
was just gonna get to that. The other
Okay,
side is the dark side where you
right.
go down the rabbit hole of depression, anxiety, lost, you have
Yes.
no boundaries, so you
Uh-huh.
become part of a cult.
Yeah,
You're trying to find somewhere to belong because
right.
you don't know how to belong to yourself, drugs and alcohol. These things can be exacerbated by this type of direction. But
Okay.
again, warning you about that is to give you a heads up on, how you can take better care of yourself
Mhm.
by not letting that take you down that direction.
Pisces
So
also rules health,
yeah, well, it does. I mean, but we're talking spiritual health
so this is spiritual health,
because
okay.
I believe in metaphysics. So whatever
Right.
your energy's doing, your
Mm,
body will react to it.
absolutely.
So yeah,
It manifests physically,
yeah, and that's
yes,
the last place of manifestation is the physical. If it's gotten to that, it's critical.
absolutely.
So
So that's the year pretty
yeah,
much, and we'll break it down into segments throughout 2022. Um, I would say get a life jacket going into 2022. Is that fair with all the water coming?
yeah, yeah. Make sure you're floating and not sinking.
and,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
make sure you've surrounded yourself with people who anchor you,
Yeah.
that are a source of stability, not with people who are lost. When lost people surround themselves with other lost people, which it sounds like is a kind of a cult mentality,
Right.
or drug addicts that do drugs together, nothing good will come from it. So I'm looking forward to 2022. It's a 6 year, is that right? Which is Virgo, because
Yeah.
we're leaving a 5 year, which was Leo.
Yeah.
So it'll take on the tone, Virgo's worker bee, do the work, build,
Well,
rebuild.
the interesting thing, it is the opposite of Pisces.
Right.
So all things work in oppositions. So it
Oh,
chooses to be a 6 year, which is perfection.
yes.
You have a six in your story.
Yes.
And so, don't, that's where we can go to idealism.
Okay.
Don't live something that has to be perfect. Don't create anxiety, pressure on yourself that something has to be exactly the way you need it to work out. It's go with the flow because that's Pisces. Go with the flow. It's a combination of intent, a healing intent, and
Yeah.
going with the flow and seeing where it takes you. It is not a year for electric engineers, the left brain, I mean, the
Mhm.
scientists will be innovative and come up with things. And I said it will be a very big year of innovation, but those who operate more off the right brain, the left brain, probably. So they'll see something they never saw before. Like even Joe, being, a rocket scientist, he got,
Right.
oh my God, I never saw that before. Those things will happen spontaneously to people.
Oh, well, I mean, it's a new year. I'm actually somebody who enjoys rebuilding. I will say to all of my fixed brothers and sisters out there, Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, Scorpio, you're going to navigate 2022 better if you can, as Tom said, go with the flow. Just loosen your grip on life. We tend to white knuckle it through life and control our environment. We're not going to be able to control everything. We're going to have to accept that and move forward with faith.
Yeah. Yes.
Keep the faith,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Well, Tom, thank you for
Sure.
being here. I can't wait to do every season with you and go over it more definitively and really get to look at it and share that with our audience. I'm looking forward to that. So thank you for coming in
You're
studio.
welcome. Of course.
And I just want to say to all of you out there, all of my believers, don't stop believing. And I'll see you next week.